I have driven past the same fence on Route 340 in Lancaster County for 3 years. 8 miles of white oak posts running the length of 3 farms. The posts go directly into the ground without post anchors, without gravel drainage, without concrete collars. I stopped and asked about them in the fall of 2022. The oldest section of that fence was installed in 1887, not repaired in 1887. Installed. The posts in the ground right now, the ones I was looking at on a gray October afternoon, went into that soil 136 years ago. They have not been replaced. They have not been treated since installation. They are still structurally sound enough that the farmer whose family owns that property grazes cattle against them without concern. I told the man I was talking to that this was not possible. He shrugged and showed me his great-great-grandfather's farm journal from 1887, which documents the fence installation with the number of posts set, the cost of materials, and a single line describing how each post was prepared before it went in the ground. The preparation took 45 minutes per post. The total material cost was approximately 2 cents per post in 1887 currency. I have calculated the modern equivalent. It is between $1 and $2 per post, depending on current linseed oil prices. The lumber industry sells pressure-treated pine fence posts for between $12 and $22 each. They require replacement on average every 15 to 25 years. They contain copper azole or copper naphthenate preservatives, the modern replacements for the chromated copper arsenate that was banned for residential use in 2004 because of documented soil and groundwater contamination. A post that costs $2 to prepare and lasts 136 years is not a product the lumber industry wants to exist in public awareness. A post that costs $18 and needs replacement every 20 years is a product they can build a recurring revenue stream around. The man whose fence I was standing beside is named Daniel Zook. He farms the same land his family has farmed for 5 generations. He told me his father taught him the treatment. His grandfather taught his father. The chain goes back further than anyone in his family can document with certainty. But the 1887 journal entry suggests the technique was already established practice at that point. Before I tell you what the treatment is, I want to tell you about the historical documentation that validates it, because this is not folk wisdom that I'm asking you to take on faith. In 1938, the United States Forest Service published a bulletin titled Wood Preservation in Agricultural Fencing. Bulletin number 1078. It was authored by researchers at the Forest Products Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin, and it summarized testing conducted between 1915 and 1935 on fence posts treated with various preservation methods. The testing involved posts from 43 different wood species installed in 22 different soil types across 16 states. Each post was inspected annually for structural integrity. The bulletin documented that posts prepared with the charring and oil treatment method, which it described as a traditional farm practice in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana German communities, showed average service lives between 40 and 60 years in the test plots. The standard untreated posts of the same wood species showed average service lives between 7 and 14 years, 40 to 60 years against 7 to 14, more than 4 times the service life, at $2 per post versus $18 for modern pressure-treated lumber, and factoring in the replacement cost over a 60-year period, the economic difference is substantial enough that the bulletin's authors recommended further study and potential wider promotion of the technique. Further study was not funded. The bulletin is in the National Agricultural Library Archive. I found it through a footnote in a 1992 University Extension publication on alternative fence post preservation that itself was never widely distributed. Here is the treatment, exactly as Daniel Zook described it to me, and exactly as his great-great-grandfather documented it in 1887. The first step is charring. You take the section of the post that will be underground, typically the bottom 18 to 24 inches, and you char it over a fire until the outer surface is uniformly black and carbonized to a depth of approximately 1/4 inch. The charring should be complete and even. No spots of uncharred wood should be visible. The charred layer should be firm and consistent, not flaking or powdery. The charring converts the outer wood fiber into carbon. Carbon does not rot. Carbon does not provide nutrition for the fungi that cause wood decay. Carbon does not absorb moisture the way raw wood does. A uniform carbon surface on the underground portion of a fence post creates a biological barrier between the wood and the soil organisms responsible for decay. This principle is thousands of years old. Japanese builders developed a version of it called Sho Sugi-ban for exterior siding. The Amish developed their version independently for agricultural use. The Forest Products Laboratory Bulletin documents both traditions in separate sections. The chemistry is identical. The carbon layer created by controlled charring is the most effective natural wood preservative available. The second step is the oil treatment. While the charred section is still hot from the fire, you apply raw linseed oil to the charred surface. The heat from the charring drives the oil into the carbon and into the wood fiber beneath. Raw linseed oil penetrates wood deeply when applied to a heated surface. When it cures, it polymerizes into a solid protective film that fills the voids in the carbon layer and creates a waterproof barrier. The combination of the carbon layer and the cured linseed oil does two things. The carbon prevents biological decay by eliminating the surface that rot fungi need to establish. The linseed oil prevents moisture penetration that would allow the carbon layer to crack or spall over years of freeze-thaw cycling. Daniel Zook chars his posts over a wood fire in his farmyard. He uses a metal trough filled with linseed oil that he heats on the same fire. He immerses the charred section in the hot oil for approximately 5 minutes, then removes it and allows it to drain and cool before setting the post. The total processing time per post is between 30 and 45 minutes, including the time to char, the time to oil, and the cooling and draining time. The linseed oil can be reused for multiple posts until it is exhausted. For a farm fence of 100 posts, the treatment requires approximately a day and a half of work and between $20 and $30 of linseed oil depending on current prices. The fence lasts 136 years. The pressure-treated alternative lasts 20 years and costs $1,800 in materials alone for 100 posts, plus the labor to replace them 3 or 4 times across the same period. I want to tell you something specific about why pressure-treated lumber replaced traditional preservation methods in American fencing and construction. Before 1950, the most common preservation approach for fence posts and structural ground contact lumber in rural America was some version of what I have just described. Charring, oil treatment, pine tar application, or combinations of these. The Forest Products Laboratory Bulletin from 1938 documented all of these methods and their relative effectiveness. The research was done, the methods were understood. In the 1940s and 1950s, industrial producers of chromated copper arsenate, a wood preservative that could be applied under pressure in a factory setting, began marketing pressure-treated lumber to the construction industry. The advantages of pressure-treated lumber are real. It can be manufactured at scale in a controlled environment. It requires no preparation by the end user. It produces a visually consistent product, but it requires purchasing the pre-treated product rather than preparing raw lumber yourself. That shift from a farm preparation method using raw linseed oil to a factory preparation method using a proprietary chemical treatment converted a $2 input cost into an $18 purchase price. It also converted a permanent maintenance-free installation into a recurring replacement cycle. The lumber and chemical industries did not suppress the traditional methods through any dramatic action. They simply marketed their product heavily to contractors and builders who found it more convenient, and the traditional knowledge quietly stopped being transmitted as the generation that knew it aged out. Daniel Zook's family kept it because they were farming the same land and maintaining the same fences and had every practical reason to use the method that worked. Now let me give you the specific details that determine whether a treated post lasts 40 years or 100. Wood species matters significantly. Not all wood responds equally to charring. The best species for fence posts in charring applications, documented in the Forest Products Laboratory Bulletin, are white oak, black locust, Osage orange, and red cedar. These species have naturally dense grain that chars evenly and resists the cracking of the char layer under freeze-thaw stress. Pine and fir, which are the species most commonly used in modern pressure-treated fence posts, can be charred, but the char layer is less stable because the grain is less dense. For pine posts treated by charring, the oil penetration step is more critical because it compensates for the lower natural stability of the char layer. Daniel Zook uses white oak because his family's land in Lancaster County has a woodlot that includes white oak. Black locust, if you can obtain it, is arguably the most rot-resistant Native American species, and the charring treatment on black locust produces results that approach the fence I described at the opening of this video. Black locust fence posts treated with charring and linseed oil have been documented in farm surveys lasting over a century and a half. The charring depth also matters. The Forest Products Laboratory testing showed that posts charred to a depth of 3/16 of an inch showed significantly more decay over the test period than posts charred to 1/4 inch. The additional 60 seconds of charring time per post that achieves the deeper char is the difference between 40 years of service and 60 years. You can measure charring depth approximately by pressing a fingernail into the charred surface after it is cooled. If the nail penetrates into soft wood beneath the charring is not deep enough. The char should resist nail penetration across its entire surface. The oil application temperature is critical. Linseed oil applied cold to a room temperature post penetrates approximately 1/16 of an inch into the wood surface. Linseed oil applied hot to a hot charred surface penetrates approximately 5 times deeper. The depth of penetration is what determines the longevity of the protective layer. Cold application produces a surface coating that weathers and cracks within a decade. Hot application produces a structural impregnation that lasts for generations. Daniel Zook told me his grandfather taught his father that the oil should be hot enough to smoke slightly but not to ignite. If it ignites, the temperature is too high and the oil is oxidizing rather than penetrating. If it does not smoke, the temperature is too low and penetration will be shallow. The practical test is a drop of water flicked onto the oil surface. If the water skips and sizzles, the oil is at the correct temperature. I want to address the environmental question directly because it comes up in the comments whenever wood preservation is discussed. Pressure-treated lumber using chromated copper arsenate was banned for residential use in 2004 in the United States because the arsenic in the compound leached into soil and groundwater around treated structures at concentrations that exceeded EPA safe levels. The current alternative, alkaline copper quaternary, has been tested to lower leaching rates but is still classified as a restricted pesticide, and its long-term environmental impact on soil biology in residential applications is still being evaluated. Raw linseed oil cures into a stable polymer that does not leach, does not contaminate soil or groundwater, and breaks down through normal biological processes over decades without producing toxic byproducts. Charred carbon is inert. Neither substance is classified as a hazardous material, neither requires special disposal procedures for offcuts or waste. Neither requires protective equipment during application beyond normal handling precautions for hot materials. The treatment that lasts longer and costs less is also the treatment with no documented environmental impact. The treatment that costs more and needs replacement every 20 years is the one with documented soil and groundwater contamination effects sufficient to trigger a federal ban of its primary active ingredient. I want to tell you about a specific test that anyone can run this weekend to validate exactly what I am describing before spending a single dollar on materials. Take 2 scraps of the same wood. A 2x4 offcut from any home improvement project works fine. Char the end of one piece over your gas stove burner or a propane torch until you have a uniform black surface extending 2 inches from the end. Apply a thin coat of raw linseed oil to the charred end while it is still warm. Let the other piece remain untreated. Bury both pieces 4 inches deep in your garden or a pot of damp soil. Leave them for 1 year. At the end of the year, dig them up and examine both. The untreated piece will show the beginning of surface decay in most soil types. The grain will have opened slightly. You may see the beginning of fungal staining in the wood fiber. In highly active soil with good moisture, the decay in 1 year can be significant. The charred and oiled piece will look essentially identical to the day you buried it. This is not a dramatic demonstration. 1 year is not enough time to see dramatic decay in untreated wood, but it is enough time to see the beginning of the process, and the beginning is where the divergence starts. After 5 years, the untreated piece will be showing serious structural compromise. After 10 years, it may be crumbling. After 20 years, it will need replacement. After 136 years, it will not exist. The charred piece at 1 year looks the same as on day 1. The trajectory from that starting point is what Daniel Zook's fence demonstrates. I also want to address the practical question of what to do with existing fence posts that are beginning to show decay. If you have pressure-treated posts that are still structurally sound but showing surface weathering, you cannot retroactively char them. The treatment has to be applied to the underground section before installation. But you can extend their service life significantly by digging the soil away from the post base, drying the exposed section, and applying hot linseed oil to the wood surface at the soil line, which is where moisture-driven decay concentrates in above-ground fence posts. The soil line is the most vulnerable point on any fence post because it is the zone of maximum moisture cycling. Wet during rain, dry during drought, frozen and thawed repeatedly through winter. This cycling stress accelerates decay faster than constant moisture would. A hot oil application to the soil line section of an existing post, with a collar of gravel or sand around the base to improve drainage, can add several years of service life to a post that is beginning to show decay. For new installations, the full charring and oil treatment is the correct approach. For existing installations that are not yet at end of life, the oil treatment at the soil line buys time and demonstrates the principle. One more thing: raw linseed oil versus boiled linseed oil. Hardware stores sell both. Raw linseed oil cures slowly, over weeks to months, to form a hard polymer. Boiled linseed oil, which is actually raw linseed oil with metallic dryers added to accelerate curing, forms the same polymer but within days rather than months. For the fence post treatment, raw linseed oil is correct. The slow cure is actually an advantage for post-installation because it continues to cure and harden in the ground after installation, providing progressive rather than one-time protection. The deep penetration achieved through hot application gives it weeks of curing time inside the wood fiber. Boiled linseed oil is appropriate for above-ground wood surfaces where you need quick surface hardening. For underground application, raw is better. Daniel Zook uses raw linseed oil from an agricultural supplier. He buys it in 5-gallon pails. The current price is approximately $60 for 5 gallons, which treats approximately 50 posts at the oil usage rate for a fully submerged section. $1.20 per post in oil cost, plus 2 to 4 cents in charring fuel, against $18 to $22 for a pressure-treated post that needs replacement in 20 years. The Forest Products Laboratory Bulletin from 1938 is 60 pages long. I read all of it. Most of it covers things that are no longer relevant to residential fence installation, the comparative performance of different preservative chemicals and industrial treatment methods. But one section stopped me, and I want to share it with you directly. The section is titled Traditional Farm Practices in Pennsylvania and Ohio German Communities. It documents observations collected between 1915 and 1925 from farmers in Lancaster County, Holmes County, and Tuscarawas County who were still using pre-industrial wood preservation methods. The researcher who wrote the section spent 2 growing seasons visiting farms and documenting what he found. He writes that he observed fence posts in active service that local farmers attributed installation dates to ranging from the 1840s to the 1870s. He verified 3 of these attributions against property records and confirmed posts with documented installation dates of between 50 and 80 years prior to his observation that remained structurally sound. He describes the charring and oil treatment in technical detail and notes that it was described to him by multiple farmers as knowledge transmitted from fathers and grandfathers without variation in method across at least 3 generations. He writes that the consistency of the technique across multiple unrelated families in geographically separated communities suggested that it had been well-established practice in those communities for considerably longer than living memory extended. He concludes the section by recommending that the technique receive further study as a potentially viable alternative to industrial preservative treatment for agricultural applications. That recommendation was the last time the Forest Products Laboratory formally addressed traditional preservation methods in any publication I have been able to find. The next decade saw the rapid adoption of industrial chemical treatment as the commercial standard for agricultural and construction lumber. The research that would have validated the alternative was never funded. Daniel Zook does not know about the 1938 bulletin. He does not need to. He has a fence that has been standing since 1887. I want to tell you one more thing. Something I did not expect to find when I started looking into this. The charring and oil treatment I have described is not only more durable and less expensive than pressure-treated lumber, it is also more beautiful. A properly charred white oak post develops a surface texture that does not exist in manufactured lumber. The carbon layer reveals the grain structure of the wood in a way that no paint or stain can replicate. It develops a patina as it weathers. After 10 years in the ground and 5 years of exposure above ground, a charred and oiled white oak post looks like something that belongs in the landscape in a way that a gray, pressure-treated pine post does not. The fence on Route 340 in Lancaster County is not just functional. It is the most beautiful fence I have encountered in 3 years of traveling through agricultural Pennsylvania. The posts have the color and texture of something that has earned its place in that ground, because they have. 136 years is a long time to earn anything. The farmer who showed me his great-great-grandfather's journal that October afternoon walked me along his fence line for a quarter mile before I left. He ran his hand along several posts as we passed them. He was not performing. He was just acknowledging something. The posts have been there longer than any living person can remember. They will be there after anyone currently alive is gone. That is what it looks like to build for the one who comes after. I want to give you the complete practical protocol before the close. Everything in one place, in the order you do it. Select your wood. White oak, black locust, or red cedar are the best choices. If you cannot obtain those species, use the straightest, densest grain pine you can find and increase your oil application time. Prepare the fire. A wood fire or a propane torch both work. The fire needs to be hot enough to produce a consistent char. Most people find a propane weed burner, which costs about $30 and is useful for many other farm and garden applications, is the easiest tool for consistent charring. Mark the underground section. Measure and mark 18 to 20 inches from the bottom of the post. This is the section you will char and oil. Above the mark, the post is above ground and does not need the underground treatment, though a single coat of linseed oil on the above ground section adds weather resistance. Char the marked section. Hold the post over the flame and rotate it continuously to achieve even charring. Work your way up from the bottom, overlapping each pass slightly. The char is ready when the surface is uniformly black and you cannot see any uncharred wood grain through the carbon layer. Test with your fingernail. The char should resist penetration across the entire treated section. Heat the oil. Use raw linseed oil in a metal container. Heat it over the fire to smoking temperature. Do not leave it unattended at this temperature. Have a lid available to smother a flare-up if the oil ignites. Apply the oil. While the post is still hot from charring, brush or pour the hot oil generously onto the charred section. The heat from the post and the heat from the oil both contribute to penetration. Apply until the surface stops absorbing oil readily. Allow to drain and cool. Stand the post vertically with the treated section down on gravel or wire mesh and allow excess oil to drain for 30 to 60 minutes. The post should cool to handling temperature before installation. Set the post immediately. The oil continues to cure in the ground after installation. The longer you leave it before setting, the more the oil hardens on the surface rather than continuing to penetrate. Set within 24 hours of treatment for best results. Backfill with gravel at the soil line. The soil line is the most vulnerable point on any post. Backfilling the bottom 6 inches of the post hole with coarse gravel rather than native soil improves drainage at the critical moisture zone and further extends post life. That is the complete protocol. 45 minutes per post. $2 in materials. 136 years of service, documented. Tell me in the comments what species of wood you have available on your property or what you currently pay for fence posts. And tell me if anyone in your family or community has ever used charring or pine tar or any traditional wood preservation method, because I am documenting the geographic distribution of this knowledge and where it survived and where it disappeared. Subscribe and hit the bell. Next week, I am going to show you the Amish seed-saving method that has produced the same tomato variety on the same Chester County farm for over 100 years without genetic drift and without purchasing new seed. The seed company that holds the commercial rights to the most popular American tomato varieties needs you to buy new seed every spring. The Amish family I spoke with has not bought tomato seed since before that company was incorporated. Stay with me, there is more.